wanted to share a tool that I started using recently. And if you're doing any prospecting or lead sourcing from LinkedIn, it's definitely worth checking out. The tool is called Surf, and it's spelled SURFE. It's a Chrome extension that allows you to add contacts to your CRM directly from LinkedIn. I use it to add contacts quickly, follow my deals, keep track of my notes, and it's actually saved me a bunch of time. The data is always 100% accurate because I don't have to copy and paste each detail from each contact over to my CRM. Instead, Surf does it all for me automatically with just one click. Now, the folks over at Surf have been kind enough to put together a promo offer for fans of SSP. You can go to the link in the show notes and use the promo code JWSURF with an E 5 for a 5% discount on your first year. Check out the link in the show notes and go check them out. My guest today is Renan Devillieres. Renan is the CEO and founder of OSS Ventures based in Paris, France. Now, I love when I have someone on the show who is doing something completely different in the world of SaaS. And what makes Renan and his company very interesting is they are focused on the manufacturing industry and category. And you don't hear a lot about certain types of verticals in SaaS, manufacturing being a big one. Healthcare is another one that comes to mind. Of course, there's more and more of that these days, but there's a lot of underserved verticals in the business world, and I think manufacturing is one of those. So Renan and I talk about the companies that are in his portfolio as part of OSS Ventures, his go-to-market approach for selling to manufacturing companies, and some of the solutions that they're building to help solve really big, complex problems for these types of companies. Now, the big takeaway from the episode is that there's this massive opportunity in manufacturing SaaS, and Renan and his team are on the forefront of solving some of these huge problems, and they're looking to hire a large number of sellers and business development professionals to help them bring some of these products to market. So the call to action in the episode was to check out some of the job postings on his website, which I've posted in the episode notes. Overall, fantastic conversation, super interesting. And so with that, welcome Renan. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. Glad we got connected. Tell us first a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me. Big fan of the show. So my name is Renan. I'm 36 years old, and I worked in manufacturing and operations up until 28. Then I created a company, a technological startup that was selling HR services, recruitment. Ended up selling my shares of that company and exiting. It was between Latin America and San Francisco. And now we created OSS Venture Builder. And so OSS Venture Builder is a venture builder. So we basically create startups and then onboard founders to head the companies once the product are built and the first clients are there. And so in the past 3 years and a half, we created 15 companies. The 15 companies are live in 1,080 factories because we only sell to factories. And on those 15 product lines, I would say that 9 are already teams of more than 40 people up and running, selling like out of the water.
Amazing. So how did you come up with the idea for that, first of all?
So I started my career in manufacturing, right? And so I have some numbers for you. Manufacturing and operations is 25% of the world GDP. It's 0.7% of startups. So there is a huge discrepancy. The second stat is that the IT/software budget of manufacturing and operations is less than 4% of sales. It is expected to go to 8% by 2030.
Okay.
So wow. Massive catch up.
Yeah.
And the third thing is in San Francisco, a friend told me a joke, which is that there are only 2 ways of making money in enterprise software. And that is either to bundle or to unbundle. And so I think, and numbers are starting to prove it, that we are in the unbundling phase of software for manufacturing. Before it was ERP taking 80% of the budget, and it will be less than 40% in 2030. And so there's that explosion of value where you can put SaaS and you can put different software in the factories.
So the companies that you have coming in that you're onboarding, are they predominantly SaaS products then, or is it other types of services and systems as well?
Only SaaS.
That's okay. And what kind of things are you seeing with these companies that are coming in onboarding? What's working well for them to get their message out there and get in front of their target buyers?
Yeah, it's actually very interesting. So the factories in Europe and in the US, it's the same. You have about 5 to 10% of factories that are owned by very big corporations, S&P 500, like big corporations. You have about 20% that are single factory companies. But you have the bulk, so the bulk of the market, and it's companies, 3 to 15 factories, family owned, great growth, and this is our target market. And in this target market, the numbers are pretty clear and pretty simple. If you sell something to a factory that is less than $100K per year, then the factory director doesn't need to tell corporate.
Interesting. Okay. So if you
And
can go that threshold, it's going to shorten your deal cycle pretty significantly.
Yes. And so we tried going for headquarters, it was a mistake. So now that what we are doing is we target 1 or 2 factories directly, site director. We say, look, we can make you gain this amount of money and it's 10K or $20K and test us for 4 weeks. They do that, they see that they gain money and we say, okay, let's deploy and it's 80K, 100K per year. And they say, yeah, sure. And so we deploy 1 factory. That sales cycle is about 5 to 6 months. And after that sales cycle, we go to corporate and we say, look, that's amazing. Don't you want to have that in all your factories? And 50% of the time, in 6 weeks, we have a headquarter contract to deploy, and we generally deploy about 50% of all factories.
Got it.
So by doing that, you're going to a value of selling of like 400K, 500K per year for a given account. And the secret that we have at OSS Venture is that all our companies are sharing their CRM. And so 40% of all the sales that all the companies are doing is cross-selling. Like that first product, there is another one. Here is it. Yes. And so that's how we kind of, I won't say we cracked the thing, but we have very good insight in how to scale fast in a very conservative industry.
Yeah, I think manufacturing is probably one of the categories in SaaS that's not been served over the last decade, right? And yeah, it's really interesting to hear that it's, predominantly kind of family owned. It's all very consolidated in this space. What are some ways that you get in touch with the right person at a company like that? Is it through outbound prospecting campaigns? Or are you running demand gen, sort of inbound demand gen type campaigns? How do you find the right person at a company like that?
So our 3 best channel to get top of the funnel is 1, mail, like very strong mailing and very personalized, saying, okay, you're in textile. Here is a use case from textile. They gained X amount of money and here is how. And following up with a video or with some white paper. And usually after some time, you get some interest. Our targets, they are not on LinkedIn. They really don't care about online. They only go online to check for reinsurance and making sure that you're actually a company. So that's our first channel. The second channel is direct cold call. So we have people cold calling. And the third channel, which is hilarious, we found a company in Europe that uses a robot to handwrite cards.
Oh, interesting.
And so we handwrite by the robot cards, and we have more than 60% response rate.
Huh. From handwritten AI.
Yes, from handwritten notes.
Are you able to share the name of the vendor that does that?
Yes, for sure. Let me check. I think it's something like handwrite.me, something like that. I can share it with you after the show. But yeah, it's yes, I think they are Polish or something like that. And it's hilarious because they have those robots writing with actual pens, and the response rate is just through the roof.
Yeah, I know that like handwritten notes is an amazing approach to getting the attention of somebody. But if you're like me, I have very poor penmanship, and I get writer's cramp really quickly. So I have in the past tried to do a campaign, and I could get to like maybe 3 or 4 handwritten notes before I give up and throw in the towel. So it's kind of cool to hear that there's a solution for that out there.
Exactly.
Drop that in the show notes just because I think a lot of sellers out there are looking for new ways outside of the box that they can use things like AI, but still in a way that's not, bastardizing their, the human approach to selling. So that's a kind of a creative way. That's a very creative way to think about that.
Yeah, and the name of the company is Manuscry with a Y at the end, and so it's in Europe. So I don't know if there is an equivalent in the US. If not, launch the business. You get yourself a really good business.
Awesome. No, that's yeah. So for the listeners out there, if you're not, if you can't find a US based AI handwritten note tool, go start one. It could be a really, really cool venture. Love
Yeah.
that.
And so yeah, that's how we generate interest.
So those are some good channels. I want to maybe unpack a little bit of your expertise around pitching and presenting, because, not only does it sound like you've raised money, but you're also pitching to a lot of different people. It sounds like, whether that's investors or, new recruits to your program. What are some things that you've found have helped you in improving your ability to pitch or storytell or present?
I would say that, well, starting a company obviously helped because I had to pitch and pitch and pitch and pitch, and practice makes, I don't know if it makes perfect, but it makes you work. I would say that three big things really improved my getting the message around. The first one is always focus on the other person. I'm an engineer, and so I love to talk about how it works, but nobody gives a damn. And so you need to talk about what he or she gets.
Yeah.
And so that deep exercise of empathy and of getting the point across, but not my point, actually discovering their point, was like, it's still a work in progress, but I think it's very important. That would be the first. The second is intuitively, I speak less than I used to, and I pitch more by speaking less. I'm more listening to people and trying to discover their view of the world, understand what they want, and talk about them. So that would be the second. And the third, which is very powerful, is show, don't tell. So I always share real stories. I always share real data points. I always share things that are actually happening or happened. And that is so much more powerful than telling and saying this will be awesome and reasons why. But no, like your neighbor gained this amount of money because of what we did. Do you want to do the same? Way more powerful than some, this is the concept, or I don't know what.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Sort of the network effect, like being able to point to that social proof to then, maximize the point that you're trying to drive in the presentation. I like that. What are some things that have been challenges that you've had to overcome in, growing the business? What are some of the biggest setbacks that you've had? I think that the fans of the pod always like to hear, I like to, of course, pump everybody up, but there's also, it's good to hear, what doesn't go well sometimes when you're growing and scaling, several SaaS businesses. In your case, SaaS businesses. What are some of the biggest kind of setbacks and challenges that you've seen?
So I would say that the first one is recruiting, training, salespeople. It's the number one bottleneck to the growth of the whole company. Here is the thing. Our sales need to have some level of empathy to manufacturing directors. And that's a world that nobody knows. But at the same time, our salespeople need to be salespeople, right? And to be able to sell. And so there are about 320 people in all the companies right now, out of which about 80 are sales, okay? I would say that we had 40% turnover in year one because we would go for people from the manufacturing sector, but they were really bad at sales. Or we would go with typical salespeople, really pushy in SaaS, but they were not understanding the subject well enough for them to sell the thing. And so I would say that our biggest mistake was not understanding what we had to do in that. And so we invest a lot in training new salespeople, and we only take people who don't come from manufacturing but have done complex sales. And so we have an onboarding process of 2 weeks where they go in factories, they listen to interviews that we did, and they have like a virtual tour of factory to understand how it goes and blah, blah, and blah, 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 for them to get that sliver of manufacturing knowledge that they need to be able to sell to those people. And one of our biggest headache is that if you are looking for people able to sell SaaS to manufacturing companies, they do not exist yet. Because there are no SaaS in manufacturing. So we have to create them.
So how do you do that? Is there another similar experience set that you pull from that can lend itself well to selling to manufacturing? I'm really curious there.
We've had good results with people coming from infrastructure, telecom, because it's highly technical, high touch, complex, but very honest people, very down to earth, very return investment driven. There's not much hype in the selling process. It's just this is the value, let's get to it. And so we've had good success with that. We've had good success with people coming from the big projects selling, so construction, for example, because those are the same environment where people are very no-nonsense, very pragmatic. Like when you have a factory, you don't have time for all the things. So culturally, it's kind of the same as construction. And so we've had good success with that, with the proper training. And that is where we historically we are bad, but we are improving on that.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, that's it. It is in some ways almost like a new category of SaaS. So you're having to really think differently about everything and find as much complementary talent as you can find in order to bring them in to build these companies. So do you call it a portfolio that you have? Is that how you'd refer to it? Okay.
Yeah,
so
portfolio.
Your portfolio, do you have one or two companies that's outperforming the other ones significantly, or are they all pretty level?
It's pretty level. We started 3 years and a half ago. And so you have the first batch. The first batch is 60 to 80 people company. They're in several hundreds of factories and everything. You have the second batch. They are like 10 to 30 people company. They are in several dozens of factories. And you have the batch of companies that we are creating right now, where it's 4 people coding furiously their first product. So it's really pretty different batch. What's interesting, I think, is that I'm very data driven, so I'm going to give you some stats.
Yeah.
We have 8% follow through for our first 2 startups from cold call to first contract, which is like 4 times benchmark in SaaS.
Interesting. Yeah, that is wow.
And I have another stat for you. If you call a factory director and you tell him, apart from machine maker, how many people called you this year to sell you software, the average is 2.3.
Wow.
And only ERP vendors.
That's insane. So yeah, I think if you're calling into like retail or D2C brands, you're calling into other tech companies, it's a crazy percentage. So this is a completely green field where there's just not been this saturation of people calling and emailing and hounding the buyers. So it's a really cool marketplace. Is the pitch itself, like when you're pitching to manufacturing factories, is it technical or is it more business oriented?
It's very interesting. We have a third of the portfolio that is highly technical, like very nerdy. For example, we invested in full speed automation. They are doing GitHub, but for machines. So basically, you can code in the cloud and you push the code to the machines. Okay, that is very nerdy. You sell to the nerds. It's a platform sales. Like it's very nerdy. At the same time, we have Oplit, which is a planning and supply chain solution. They are purely selling stock, time to produce, and productivity. So it's a very businessy decision. And so I would say it's 1/3, 2/3. And we are having better results with the non-technical sales.
Interesting. Okay. So a lot of my listeners out there might be wondering how they can break into doing something like this. Maybe they even want to come work for one of your companies. How can someone get in touch with you to do that? And what advice would you give them to go through sort of the interview and evaluation process?
Yeah, sure. So we have a website that is called oss.ventures. So oss.ventures. And so you can call us and leave us a message here. I would say also that my main message for listeners is, of course, come work with us and just go to factories. Like counterintuitively, it is the future. If we want to solve climate change, we will have to produce differently. At Tesla, software is 20% of the cost of production. At Stellantis, it's 4%. So in the next 10 to 20 years, software in factories is going to explode because we are reshoring everything and everything. And so this is the perfect moment to start working for software in factories.
That's really cool. Yeah, there's a bigger vision at play here. There's a bigger mission at play here, it sounds like. And I think you're right that this is a really huge untapped opportunity. And why not, if you're a seller out there, go and try to find a new category that's rising versus go and play in the same space that's already really saturated. Go and do something kind of unique and get a really customized skill set. And hell, close a lot of deals along the way too, because it sounds like you guys are having a lot of success with resonating with these factories and being able to bring product in and sell significant deal sizes. I mean, up to 100K, that's a really great SaaS deal. That's a huge commission check for a seller. And I can see that would lend itself to very high growth if you can continue to sell at that level to those factories. So what advice would you give to listeners out there who are either, maybe they're interested in starting a company of their own, maybe they're just trying to sell more product or grow their career, any kind of final words of wisdom on just business advice in general would be really interesting to hear from you.
What I would say is, if you want to have little worry, you go where everyone is. But if you want to gain a lot of money, you go where not everyone is, and you go contrarian. Everyone is going in fig tech. Everyone is going into those categories. Those categories are milked to death. Yeah. And it's probably the end of a cycle. And so work and expose yourself to new cycles and new opportunities that are not intuitive, and you may stumble onto something big.
That's great advice. Go where there's blue ocean, as they call it. There's, green field where there's not a lot of other people playing, and there's some, hopefully riches in that niche, right? As they say, a lot of cliches there. Anything, I guess, how can my listeners get in touch with you directly or follow you if they'd like to do so?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Sipanza on Twitter. So please connect. And also you can send me a mail at renan@oss.ventures. Pretty simple.
Pretty simple. Well, Renan, thanks so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate your insights into this category of SaaS. And best of luck as you continue to grow OSS and scale out your venture.
Thank you. Thank you, Jess. It was blessed.
I've got a secret weapon for you that's going to skyrocket your sales without the unnecessary headaches that come along with using one of the big player CRM systems. That secret weapon is Close CRM. Now, let's face it, we've all been there. We've used a clunky, confusing system that kind of makes you want to throw your laptop out the window. Well, fear not, Close is here to save your time, money, and sanity. Close has all of the powerful sales tools you need, minus the drama, to manage your leads, track your deals, and crush your targets effortlessly. It has calling, emailing, SMS, multi-channel sequences, and it even has meeting tracking built right in. It's easy to set up and implement. You can stop screwing around with CRMs that aren't built for you and start selling and managing customers today. You can start a free trial using the link in the show notes, special for SSP fans.